All right, we're back. I want to make a point too. Doug talked about feeling like the dumbest guy in the studio. Uh, I've been in the studio with Doug, and I can tell you, when that happens, I am by far the dumbest guy. The brain that you have on you, Doug, is absolutely fantastic. So I appreciate you stealing my trick and claiming to be the dumbest. But in this case, I can tell you definitively it is me, and that's why I got you here. We're going to talk about some articles. So what we do here, especially if somebody's new watching the show, is instead of just covering news, we take a look at our things that if you're in a leadership position. So this started as a Startup Security Weekly, but a lot of people were liking our take on leadership and innovation and communication and things like that. So what I try to do are pick topics that if you're a vendor, these are useful to you. You're running a startup, also useful to you. You're part of an enterprise security team. Yep. Now, sometimes you got to twist it a little bit to make it work, but that's actually what I see as the difference between not, being successful in security and still kind of struggling. So this is interesting. Over the last year or so, we talk a lot about this idea of pivoting. And one of the things I've come to realize is there's a pivot and there's an evolution. And evolution is it's just the subtle refinement, maybe not so subtle, but it's the refinement. The pivot is we started to do X and now we do Y. And if you follow the mantras of everything, it's about failure, 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 which PS in security we abhor. Failure to us it feels just unacceptable, which I don't agree with, but we get it. There was some research out that said actually most of the pivots are born of opportunity, not of failure. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So that's the first article of the week. And basically what they said was, look, if you hit a problem, most of us solve it, especially if you're entrepreneurial in nature. And I would say security people, you hit a problem, you attack it with everything you got, you figure it out. What you tend to find is sometimes that creates this opportunity. Oh, you can do this. Oh, you can solve that problem. Let's get after it. Let's go do that. And what it says then, and I thought this was the important part for security people, it's the mindset. You can look at the negative side of things, but you want to be positive more than you're negative. And I know some smartass is sitting there right now going, well, I'm positive that's not going to work. That's not how it works. What we're talking about is taking a look at the opportunities and realizing it. And then, I know we all talk about fail early, fail often, fail fast, recover from it. But what I'm starting to take a look is worry less about the failure, more about like take that moment, take that breath, look at the situation, consider the implications, and then choose accordingly. And then the last little piece from this one, and I'm kind of curious your take on this, Doug. It said, who's helping you set the tone? So if you're an entrepreneur and you take on funding, well, then that person has a valued stake in how things go, and they've got an opinion. And depending on how savvy they are, how known they are, their opinion might be the best opinion in the world, very informed, creates a great constraint, unleashes you, you go kick ass, or not. But in the enterprise, who's signing your paycheck? Who are you going to for budget, and what do they need? And that starts to influence and temper it to some extent. And that may be where and how, even as a security team, you pivot. And what I see, and so Doug, I'm curious if you see this too. I'm finding the pivot that I'm finding the most right now in the enterprise security space is we don't want to be the team of no anymore. We're not here to block everything. We're not here to protect everything. We want to be the team of yes, and we want to go make sure that the business is protected where it needs to be, and we're getting things done. And that's a pivot. That's a big pivot. It feels kind of good. But I mean, what's your take on this? You've worked across the whole spectrum.
Well, so for me, I agree with you. I think that's where security teams need to go in the enterprise, because that is the sort of law enforcement piece that's been around for a long time. And there's this old thing about beat cops versus SWAT. And beat cops were these guys in New York and other big cities that they walked the street. They knew everybody. They knew the person who beat up their spouse. They knew the person who had a drinking problem. They knew which businesses got robbed. And they always were aware of when things were wrong. And they were an active participant in outcomes. And I mean, that's what you're talking about. And but then there's SWAT, and there's nothing wrong with SWAT, guys. That's Eric. SWAT is a different role, and SWAT were the people you called when all else was failing. So this is this is the people that have to come in and unfortunately take the shot. But security teams need to be more like beat cops and be involved in the organization and be the go-to person instead of the no, like you said. So to me, the pivot is to pivot into the positive. I'm positively assured that that's not a negative or something like that. But to pivot pivot into the positive, which sounds like a pop song or something that I would really hate. But pivot into the positive, or a poster. It's a poster for sure. It's one of those posters with a cat on it or something. You hang it. Yeah, that HR gives you to hang in your office. That I'm pivot to the positive. But the idea that security teams stop being SWAT. Not that you don't need that. You still need SWAT because sometimes things are going to go south. But if you can pivot to the positive and be an active part of that boardroom, an active part of that management, that's what real leadership is reaching out and getting all those opinions and then taking a pivot to the right action. And if the security team becomes a part of that, they're more like beat cops. They know when things are going to go wrong, and they can advise you, and they can say, we should really keep an eye on that because that's the person that always beats up their spouse. This part over here is probably okay. And when they're trusted and when they're a part of that environment like that, instead of just being that last resort, everything changes, and you have a different role in the enterprise.
I dig it. All right, so this next one, I got no good segue to this, but I loved reading this. Yeah, I try to be clever with the segues, and I'm not sure that's even worth it. But this one, I got nothing. It was how to design an addictive product. So I went, all right, I'm in. Mostly because I wanted to figure out how do we get people to be more excited. I mean, you don't need to be addicted to security. You just need to be excited about it. So I thought, hey, there's something here. And I absolutely loved it because it talks about intrinsic motivation. There was a time I was part of a professional National Speakers Association, and they're great. I have nothing wrong with it. I'm in the Groucho Marx phase of life where I don't want to be part of anything. But there was a lot of conversation, right? Are you a motivational speaker? And sometimes you get, well, no, I'm an inspirational speaker. So, I like semantics. I'd play the difference. What's the difference? Motivation is an external force applied. I can motivate you, but once I take that force away, the only thing that gets you going is something that's more intrinsic. So I always liked that. I mean, I never split the difference on that type of stuff. But this says, do you understand intrinsic motivation? Do you understand the seeking system? And what it basically talks about is that we used to have this drive reduction theory. Thirst, hunger, and sex, that drives us. Now, I can condition people to appreciate money and shelter and different types of things. And if you understand that, then we have to behaviorally condition people based on those fundamental primal drives, and we'll get you where you want to be. But there was a guy, and I don't have the article open. He was doing experiments with monkeys and solving puzzles, and he noticed the monkeys were solving the puzzles. It wasn't about getting the food. It wasn't about the reward. It wasn't about trying to get better at it to get more food or more reward. It was fun for them. That they were purely enjoying the process of solving the puzzles. And we started to look at this, and it's created this whole new series of looking at this intrinsic motivation. Now, where I always like this is when we talk about value, one of the things I learned years ago, Doug, is that for us trying to explain security to people, first of all, we have to understand it. But if they don't know their own value, then they're not going to see value in us. They're not going to see value in what we're doing. They're so busy seeking extrinsic validation and value that trying to work with us becomes more cumbersome. So from a leadership perspective, helping people see their own value, helping them realize it from within becomes really important. And this basically says, yeah, actually people who get it and find value on themselves and in themselves, much more powerful way of doing stuff. And oh, by the way, then when you do this, create a little bit of anticipation. Let people use their imaginations and then give them variable intermittent rewards. Let them solve the challenges. Let them figure it out. Let them do those things. Now, it's interesting. I was working with a client a couple weeks ago, and we talked about, can you overtrain, over-enable the sales team? And I was reading this, and I thought, yeah. By the way, how about security? I'll tell you something I still haven't seen done. And I'm so curious your take on this. I think if we want to teach people about fishing better, instead of showing them a video, let's make it a contest. Let's have them go down to the, quote unquote, fishing hole and earn their fishing license. And it actually talks in this article about, if every time you dipped your line in the water, a fish bit it, that wouldn't be as exciting for people. You got to be thoughtful about it. You got to figure it out. There's a game to it. There's an element that improves us. And I thought, I think there's a lot of lessons here in security today. We don't have to make it all a game. I'm always leery. People go, oh, we should just make it fun. Nope. People just want it to be useful. But can we let people have a little bit of the challenge, get some rewards, feel good about it, feel good about themselves, move on to the next challenge? What do you think? Did I oversimplify some opportunity we have in security today?
Oh. Well, I was just hearing all the lawyers going, "Oh my God, no!" I think it's an interesting idea. I think people do love to be sort of engaged more than just saying, I know that I have to go. Well, I'll put it in a different context. I know every year I have to go to sexual harassment training. It's required of everybody, and it's this like online system where they show you these videos of Bill talking to Paula, and it's exactly what you expect, and it's boring, and you usually do something else while it's going on, and then you click all the little boxes, and you get a check mark, and you're done. And I don't think people get much out of that. But at the same time, I'm not sure if you turned that into a game, what it would be like. And I mean, I like the idea that you take people and say, well, okay, let's go down to the fishing hole, as you said, and see if we can outfish each other. That's a pretty cool thought. I don't know how you operationalize that in the enterprise. I think it's a little bit scary to say, well, we're going to start teaching people. I mean, just from a purely like, okay, yeah, it sounds cool, but then at the same time, wait till the press gets a hold of it and they start saying they're training people to hack, they're training people to do phishing attacks.
No, that's a great point.
But I think people would learn a lot. I think the employees would learn a lot about it, and they would understand the scams better if they actually saw them instantiated. But I think there's some mechanics in there that are going to be kind of challenging to get put in place.
And it's interesting. I'll tell you, and this is reminding me of stuff I've done in the past. I have spent an inordinate amount of time looking at passwords, like thousands of hours, but really trying to figure out how do we break down passwords and explain it. And what I found, and this is years ago, if you walk into a corporate environment, you say, how many people want to know about passwords? No hands go up. None at all. The minute I say, how many of you want to know how attackers get and break your passwords? Oh, suddenly I have their attention. Here's the cool part, though. I didn't really have to teach them that, but just a little bit, just a little taste. Suddenly they want to understand how hashing works. And then suddenly I can explain a dictionary attack. I can explain a brute force attack. And I can start to show people then how really all that matters is length of password. Like all the other fancy stuff.
I'm getting there now. Okay, you brought me there because see now I see something. I think the phishing thing threw me a little bit. I like that. So if you took a group of employees down to a room and you said, okay, here's the first part of the problem. Break into these systems. And the way they're going to break into them is by using stupid passwords or things like that. People would walk away from that with a whole new perspective of how.
Let me tell you what happened because this surprised me. I had before we went in, we had checked the average password, and the only required length was 8 characters. People were pissed, told us it was too hard to remember. We're the dumbest people ever. Get me out of this. So we set up a friendly competition. I had 5 tables, 5 people each table. I remember this clear as day. It's the first time I had to add so here's what I said. You've got 20 minutes. You got to work as a team, take all the strategies we just did. And we had a strength checker. We're going to see who comes up with the strongest, best password. And you have to be able to remember it. You can't read it off your sheet. Got to remember it.
Right.
20 minutes later, I had people that an hour before were bitching that an 8-character password was too much. They were like 30, 40, 50 character passwords. Going forward, we had to cap it. It cannot be more than 32 characters long. But the point was, I've run into some of these people 5, 8, 10 years later. They can still tell me it was a Tuesday. It was 3 o'clock. They can tell me the room they were in. They can tell me what the password was. See, this is the thing I always look at. We don't have a problem with passwords per se. We have a problem with how we break them down, how we explain them. But what's interesting as I'm looking at this is we gave them the ability to figure out themselves. And then you know where this goes, right? Well, how do I remember all these different passwords? Oh, that's a password manager. Doug, the conversations we had off of that were fantastic. And so I guess you're right. I threw people with the phishing. I've seen it on the password side, and I think we've got an opportunity for it. This is the day of shitty segues. All right, yearning for a vast and endless sea. This is we got to get Tom on the program. I'm going to have to figure out how to cyber stalk him and be his friend. But he talked about rowing in college. And this is all I loved for it because I see this in so many places. He basically said, I didn't teach them how to row. I taught them to be excited about the outcome and excited about what we could do together. And that made a difference, and it made us lifelong rowers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have come across so many security teams that when I say, what do you guys do? My phrasing is, what's your better tomorrow look like? I don't want the vision statement. I don't care what 10 years from now is. I want to know for you tomorrow, next month, what's your better tomorrow look like? Paint me the picture. Tell me what it's like. And it's fascinating how many people have absolutely no idea. Aside from having our voices heard at work, we go to work because we want a sense of meaning. Yeah. We want a paycheck. Absent that, we want to do something that excites us. And I don't see that happening in security today. And I think that's the opportunity. Get people excited about the difference that we're making. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that would be cool. I think it's tougher with us than maybe with rowers because um, this has always been a lonely profession, really. I mean, at its core, it's been a lonely profession. I think you're right. I think some of it's changing as a community has evolved. I mean, I go to these conferences now and I see people that know each other, people that want to know each other, they want to talk to each other. And shows like Security Weekly Network have really, I think, pushed some of those ideas to saying we're all in this together. We have to be a team. We have a community, and I think that's really cool, and that helps. And I think that's a better tomorrow. I think, but traditionally, this all of this stuff has always been a pretty lonely game, and it was a person in a dark room in the basement.
That's a really good. That's a really good point because I think that probably explains a lot of the challenge in trying to craft that vision. I don't know. I've been beaten on since the first day I started in this. It's, I feel hopeless and helpless at times. I'm trying to make it work. And you're telling me I got to feel good about tomorrow. And I got a positive pivot with a little cat on my cubicle. Stop, leave me alone. And really what we're saying is, yeah, but is your better tomorrow that the business is better and people understand better and everything is good? Or is your better tomorrow, this all sucks, get me out of here? And if it's this all sucks, get me out of here, stop. Just knock that stuff off. So I thought it was good. But look, we all have meetings that waste our time. So how do you get out of the meeting and waste your time? This was a great article. It's a Harvard Business Review article. I think you get, I don't know, a bunch of free ones a month. You can check it out. It starts. So here's some of the advices they give. And I pulled out some of the things that I like best. First thing, do you even know the meetings where you should be attending? Like the first way you get out of the crap that's wasting your time is you have to know what's worth your time. I'm willing to bet most of you listening right now are running it through your heads and going, don't know. So it has two things that it thinks are really good, and I completely agree, especially this first one. If there's a meeting where somebody wants to go over an overall strategic direction, go. Especially in security today. Look, here's a fundamental truth. You can't do it all. Yes, you don't have enough people. You don't have enough resources. You don't have enough time. We actually don't have a talent gap and a talent shortage, but you're going to tell yourself we do, and it's insurmountable. Yeah, look, here's the reality. The business fundamentally should have like 3 directions. You need to be pretty much in alignment with those. If there's a meeting where you can go learn what one of your business units is doing or what the company's doing overall, that meeting, that one's worth your time. Also, if there's an opportunity to go build a relationship, right, Doug, you already said this. You want to be the go-to person. You want to be the one who kind of has your finger on the pulse of the organization. And people say, gosh, when I got this meeting, let's make sure Doug's here. He knows what's up. Yeah, well, if it's about good relationships, you should be there. Now, what it then says is avoid update meetings. They're a plague. Oh, we got to do a status update. We're going to do a meeting where bring everybody to talk about. Nope. Just avoid those. Frankly, my attitude, skip it. People have asked me this question for years. Doug, I don't know your approach. Here's mine. Just don't go. Like people are like, oh, but my boss invited me. Yeah, just don't go. Like sit and have a conversation. Like my question is always, but like, what's the worst? Like, what's the worst really? You're going to get fired. You might get bitched at. Great. Have a conversation about wasting your time. But I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. Last piece then on this, but it has other ideas. Make it harder to invite you to it. Don't publish your calendar. Don't make your stuff known. Make people jump through a hurdle or two. When they send you a request, say, hey, I'd love to make time. I'm really busy. Remind me again, what's this about? How long do you really need? What are we going to get done at the end? And in fact, if you go to this article, it's got a whole bunch of questions to ask to really qualify it. I think those are great advice, great pieces of advice. And it does say too, by the way, you feel like you're trapped, you have to go, it was a total waste of your time. Then you need to sit down with some folks and say, by the way, total waste of my time. And I could have worked on project A or B. You told me those are our highest priorities, and instead you wasted my time on this other thing. I can't get that time back. I hold you accountable for it. I hate you. I hate all. No, all right, leave the last part off. But
Stop filling out those stupid little cards and saying everything was great when the meeting was a complete waste of time. I have been to so many of those stupid meetings. They handed a little evaluation form. And I remember I was at one. I won't say what it was. I sat next to a guy this was a 2-day meeting, and every day the guy was telling me how awful this was, and I was like, oh yeah, it is awful. And I was using all my tricks and having texting myself and going, oops, I got a text, I got to go outside. And at the end, they handed a little evaluation form. And I could see him filling it out, and he's marking excellent, 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 excellent. And I'm like, why are you marking excellent on everything? He said, well, I don't want him to feel bad. And I'm like, I just marked worthless, horrible, beneath contempt. You know, I mean, I literally wrote like this is why everybody hates me. And like you said, don't get invited. I don't get invited because people go, oh God, that bastard. And I do get excluded, which is great. I hate worthless meetings, and I get invited to so many of them because nobody likes meetings more than university people. They love to have meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings to discuss and meetings to evaluate. And I'm like, nothing was accomplished. I hate that. I hate meetings without agendas where they're just like, well, let's an update meeting. Let's just have a chat. You know, it's like, oh, could we just do that on the phone? It'll take 2 minutes and not, I have to go spend 3 hours at a stupid meeting. I have to go across town. I have to go down to New York. It's like, why did I have to come to this? But yeah, stop marking your little forms excellent when the meeting's a waste of time. Write waste of time on that form. That's what I write on there. Wasted 8 hours of my life. Zero content. You don't get invited back that way.
But that's not necessarily a bad strategy. You know, the other thing I find in this too is time block. One of the things I started looking at last year with a lot of teams I worked with is I said, all right, well, how do you guys do productivity? And I feel like Paul and I talked about this just last week. A lot of people said, do productivity. Like, I don't know. So, well, how do you plan your day? They're like, I don't know. If it pops up on the calendar, I go. Do you look at what's on the meeting? Do you require there's an agenda? That's, you know, and I've talked to people that they're in back-to-back meetings, just getting time to talk to me. It's like, okay, well, I got to go 2 weeks out. And that's not the whole like, Michael, I'd love to talk to you. Actually, no, I wouldn't. So I'm going to tell you I'm really busy. Like, they're just that slammed. Nobody should be, you can't get anything done. I've never seen anything. The only thing that comes out of meetings is more meetings and more work. And so what I find is the more stuff you say no to, the more your sanity stays intact, the more stuff that you can get done. Now, this is the part that I thought was interesting. There's no better way to put nails on a chalkboard for me, right? I guess you can call people layer 8, right? So go back to your OSI model. People are not layer 8. They are not part of the freaking stack. They are people. That's a dissonance move. Stop it. So when we start talking about soft skills, I find in my experience, soft skills are the hardest freaking things in the world to acquire, and that's why they're in such high demand. Now, somebody kind of put out this idea that said, you know, the hard skills are how to do it, the soft skills are how to get it done, or something like. They tried to make it all better. I hate all the concept, but you know, I'm also apparently the person who likes tilting at windmills. Here's some of the skills. I'm going to pull out 3 because we talk about them in this program all the time. Problem solving, right? My favorite question: what problem are we trying to solve? Time management and communication. And here's the rub. The recruiters, they said these are getting harder and harder to find. Things are getting worse, not better. So we spend so much time trying to figure all these things out, and we're, you know, and these, look, I appreciate they're tougher to acquire because they're tougher to teach because there's nuances to these types of things. But, you know, think about it, Doug. When you and I were in school, we had team projects, which meant, the freeloaders on my team, this person's going to be bossy pants. I hate group projects. Nobody sat us down and said, here's how you can structure a group. Here's how everybody can have their say. Here's how you guys can reconcile your differences and still move forward as a team. Those things didn't exist. We still don't know how to do that. Yet our futures, our success and security depends on our ability to collaborate and work with everybody else. So my thoughts on this were, if you yourself are looking to get better, these are some things I'd put some time in on this. I'd get training. I'd read the books. I'd make diligent, purposeful practice to get better here. Also, you're trying to hire people for your team. See if they got these things, because in fairness, they're going to be a lot harder to acquire. Maybe your opinion is different. I think I can teach anybody some security fundamentals and get them up to speed fairly quickly, provided they got the right mindset and aptitude to it. But if you can come in already understanding how to manage your time, solve problems, communicate with other people, improve yourself, that's great. I'll teach you security. And so I think when we're looking for security people, why don't we go look for people who already have this skill set? And I think we're going to get a lot further down the road. But I don't know, Doug, because you work with a lot of college-age kids. I mean, are these people looking at it wrong? Are you finding a lot of the folks that you work with, and a lot of people you consult with, they have these and we're good? This is just a bad article?
No, I agree with you. We want squads and we have snipers. You know, I mean, we want a unit of people that can do something, but what we really have is a bunch of snipers who go sit in the bushes and take action. And they're very good at the action, but they're not so good. I mean, I myself included. I mean, you tell me a team, and I'm like, I'm out. No teams. I'll just do it. Let me just handle it. And I know that's not the best approach, but I like you in college, I was on lots of teams of groups, and you got assigned to them, and they said, oh, guess what? These 5 are, but yeah, we never had any training on how all that stuff worked. And I've always been that kind of lonely, let me fix it kind of thing, because I don't know how to work. I hate people, so don't even start putting people on layer 8 of the stack. Then if you're going to layer 7.5 of the stack would have to be like, a separation barrier between the people. But
air gap.
An air gap, maybe filled with nerve gas or something might be useful. College students don't like teams. They hate teamwork. They hate to try to do that. And I mean, to be fair, I don't think that we, I've had parents say, do you teach teamwork in your program? And it's like, no, I teach programming, not teamwork. And I mean, part of that, to be fair to the professors and the universities, is we have a lot of stuff we need to get you, and we don't have a lot of time. And I've never had any training in that stuff either. So for me to teach teamwork would be a very, very hypocritical kind of thing to do when I really want to teach people how to do TCP/IP. And I mean, I agree with you. I think we need to be teaching that. So no, I don't think the article is wrong. I think the article is spot on. And I think the security community would benefit from more cohesiveness, more teams, more squads, instead of so many snipers. But getting there, I'm not sure how you're going to drag a lot of us kicking and screaming out of our big empty rooms, which I'm sitting in right now, and it makes me feel very happy, into a space filled with people where I have to deal with them one-on-one or even three-on-one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, as I keep working with security leaders today, that's their fundamental challenge, is how do we influence without authority? How do we break this cycle of reaction? Got to go work with people. How do we get invited to the meeting? Because if I don't get invited to the meeting, I don't know what needs to be secured, and then I can't allocate my resources the right way. This is the challenge of our time, at least for security leaders. And so we're going to keep working on it. We've got some ideas. Let's talk about some startup news of the week. There's a company called Sheer ID, $18 million Series B. So I had to look them up. They've got about 31.3 million in funding, 8 rounds since November 2011. This is only Series B round, so they've got a lot of equity rounds. I didn't really get a chance to dig too deep into that. But what's interesting, if you go to the website, I found that trying to articulate back the problem that they solved was a little bit elusive to me. But it seems that they basically do like an eligibility verification. So if you say I'm a college kid and therefore I'm eligible for this program, or I live in this zip code and I can work on this program or whatever else, they've got a mechanism to be able to do that. I think it's important. It's almost like what we'd call identity proofing, and they seem to have a solution on that. And I think that matters, and we'll talk about both these together. Facebook just acquired Confirm.io. They were mobile-based identity authentication software that digitally verifies and validates government-issued identification cards. So even though they call it authentication, they're really the identity proofing side to it. Are you who you claim to be? And do I have multiple methods to be able to determine, especially online, that if you say that you're Michael or Doug, that you're actually Michael or Doug, and then we can figure out ways to authenticate you in the future. They took on about $4 million in July of 2015. They were an undisclosed acquisition. And in this particular case, they said, hey, thanks, everybody. We're excited about the next journey. We're going to be part of Facebook. Oh, and by the way, we're winding everything else down. So if you were relying on us, that's awesome. But we just got bought by Facebook. Facebook is going to use us because I think if we pay attention to the news, this is important to Facebook now. They want to know who's on their network. They got to do a better job about it. But what we see right here, Doug, in the first 2 stories of the week, identity continues to be a hot topic. Not just how do we manage it, but how do we figure out who's who? And how do we help that in an online world? Any thoughts on this? When you look at it?
I say this all the time. I say identity management is stuck in about the 13th century. My word is my bond. Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, you go to the grocery store to buy something with a credit card, and they still ask you to sign. I'm like, okay, so 1, you don't know what my signature looks like. 2, so what? Where's my sealing wax and my signet ring so I can, give you my bond? Those things are so ridiculously outdated. At the university, we still have to sign things. They still, and in fact, not that long ago, I was told I can't accept, this was several years though, to be fair, I was told we can't accept this email from your email account where you said, this is okay. We need a scribble on a piece of paper because unless we have that, we can't ensure that you are you. And I was like, so you're saying that you know what my scribble on a piece of paper looks like, really? And they were like, well, no. And I was like, yeah, you don't have a record of my signature, so how on earth would you know if I made this scribble or not? So the email came from my email account. Don't you think that's more reliable than the scribble on a piece of paper that anyone could have done? Oh, well, but I mean, identity management is stuck in the 13th century. And we haven't seen much progress in it from the day when you're signing something on a little card. Oh, yeah, we've added some layers to it, but it's really still the same thing. You sign it to Facebook. I have no idea. Anyone could be using that account. So, yes, we desperately need to move out of the 13th century and into some new century. Maybe the 14th century would be good, just to start moving
we could
forward.
leap to the 15th. Well, and it's an interesting point because, I mean, you've made me flash back to, getting the first safe deposit box where I had to sign like 3 times and they actually tried to compare it. And I remember saying to one of them one time, so what was your training? And they went, none. I went, so what, you're just ballparking it? That's crazy. Like but I actually think the situation is a little bit more challenging even than you've made it out to. Online, I don't even have any of that in-person stuff. Like, I don't know who you are. You're whoever you claim to be. Yeah, it's good enough for me. And I think what we're starting to find is there's a lot of places where that's breaking down. That's creating opportunities for people who say, you know what, I can aggregate data from multiple sources, and I can use that, and I can verify the identity, which gives you a higher level of confidence in it. And so I think we're going to keep seeing that happen as we go. Also looking at more data. So Amazon acquires Squirrel. And Alphabet, out of their moonshot, their Google X stuff, they launched Chronicle. Amazon acquires Squirrel. So Squirrel is a threat hunting platform. It's an automation looking at, we're going to use all the buzzwords. It's looking at big data using artificial intelligence or machine learning to try to figure out problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as a contrast to confirm, what Squirrel said was, hey, it's business as usual. We're going to keep working with our customers. We're going to keep doing everything we can. And oh, by the way, now we're going to be part of AWS. So if you're using AWS, you're going to love it. I always love that as an approach. Obviously, it's good business. I mean, it's the business that Amazon's in. There's some undertones to this where people are looking at, as these, what they call FANG, right? So was it Facebook, Apple? Is the N Netflix?
Yes.
Google and
Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, I think. Yeah.
As they're out there doing all these things, what is that going to mean for everybody else? Here's what I keep pointing out. The new R&D is in the startups. These companies aren't doing their own R&D anymore. Now, you can argue that, Google is. No, not really. They pushed it off to the side. And, by the way, in this launch of Chronicle, they're also talking about VirusTotal, which they acquired in 2012. So the Squirrel thing I think is interesting. I don't think it's a big surprise. It's undisclosed. Typically, Doug, what we find is that if they do an undisclosed, it usually means like it's almost like an acqui-hire. Like, hey, we really wanted their intellectual property and we like their people because they're really smart. I'm totally not going to pay that valuation. So we'll just undisclose it. We'll make it good for everybody. Now, I don't mean undisclosed is a bad exit. I don't mean somebody took a bath, and I don't have insight on either of these. But I always find it curious that if you took on investment, that you're not telling the investors how you did. I don't know. It's always interesting to me. But I know you wanted to talk about Google X launching Chronicle. So Google, they reorganized a couple years ago into Alphabet, and they now have their 13th unit, and I think this is great. I mean, security 13th. It seems to fit. Their other units aren't really profitable yet. They think this one will be. They want to sell services, and their goal is to provide you better intelligence and analytics. And it looks like they're going to eat their own dog food. So their point on this, and they've got a former Best Buy / Symantec guy at the helm now, launching this, and he said, look, we're going to use this across everything. We're good with data. We've got tons of data. We always look at this type of stuff, and we're figuring out how to be better for us. And if we figure that out, we're going to help you get better for you. That actually sounds pretty promising to me. And it seems to fit. I feel like Google's been really pushing the security envelope and forcing other people to adopt even faster than they wanted to. And I've always kind of wondered, like, was that good or bad? But I've loved watching it. And now it feels like they're putting some real skin in the game. So what's your take on it? You like it?
I'm a fan. I love data. I have always loved data, and as a sort of statistician as well, I feel that that law of large numbers, big data solution is always going to be the best, because the more data you have, the better decision you can make, and the better your AI, your machine learning, all that stuff is based on data. And so who has more data than Google? Maybe, except maybe Amazon, but Google has everything there. And so that's sort of a starting point for filtering out fake bots and fake this and fake that, and identity and all those kind of things. And I would like Google to have more security, because if they could rank sites based on how reliable they are and how safe they are and how knowledgeable they are, I like the idea, because we rely so heavily on that. So Google had the SpaceX thing. They didn't have anything to do with it, and they decided to make it the 13th unit. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm glad they're doing it. I think it will lead to new and innovative things.
Well, you know what else I like about it? As I was listening to you, and I was kind of thinking about it through myself, Google's good not just at data; they've been good at context. I think that's what makes them so successful at it. And one of the mantras that I've been really on this year is, we don't have a content problem, we don't have a data problem, we have a context problem. I don't know what to prioritize or how to prioritize it. But you know what I just realized? So if you're Google and you say, hey, look, we've been using this our own data, because what you also point out there is that if I'm doing machine learning or anything else, then it's the quality of the data as well as the quality of the questions that we ask, and whether it's supervised or unsupervised and everything else, right? So there's a whole branch of science there taking a look at that. But I would argue Google's data quality is pretty good. But now if you can then build that, and I can start selling that to other people, then I have just exponentially increased both the breadth of my data and the depth and quality of my data in context. Oh, that's powerful. So now I really feel like this is something to pay attention to. I think the opportunity here is big, and I think it's going to be interesting. And I think it's going to be interesting anytime we see these big players, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world, watch where they're putting their money. They've been spinning up these huge funds. They're actively looking for people that are doing really cool things, and then they're incorporating it. And I think the question is always going to be, how do you incorporate it? Which brings us to Cisco. Right. Well, I mean, I don't want to hammer them too hard on this, but when it was the 80s, you didn't get fired for buying IBM. In the 90s and since, you don't really get fired for buying Cisco. But one of the challenges of being Cisco and a lot of these other billion-dollar companies is, well, how do you integrate? How do you acquire people and fold them into it for the things that you need to be able to do? But if you're Cisco today and you're competing aggressively against IBM and HP and others, you got to keep figuring out what you're going to do. So they acquired Skyport Systems. And it's funny, I hadn't paid attention. There's a whole category called the hyperconverged infrastructure, and this is their play into that. That market today is about 400 or 500 million, and it's estimated to be 12.8 billion of a market by 2022. So that's not, I mean, like when you look at total addressable market, that's a big market, and they've got to get in there after people and get after it. And this hyperconverged infrastructure, that's basically, you're doing virtualization and cloud computing, and you've still got more traditional stuff, and it's all coming together, and it's at times, I'm guessing, pretty confusing. So they're trying to figure that type of stuff out. But this is the one, again, so it's undisclosed, and it says, hey, we're going to use their intellectual property, their software, their network expertise, and we're going to put it into into our multiple portfolios. Oh, and by the way, we were an investor. That's the more important part to me that I think is really interesting. So a lot of people, when they look at the startups today, they're like, well, gosh, I hope they're going to exist. No, trust me. If what they're doing is good, they're going to exist. It's just a question of, the number of them that are going to IPO. I think it's going to be relatively small. I think if you're looking at a startup today, or you're in a startup today, get really super good at what you're doing, and then figure out, am I a feature of something bigger, or am I a platform? And if you're a platform, you better be raising your ass off, and good luck. But if you're trying to be a feature, or you're looking for a really cool acquisition, go solve one problem better than everybody else, and you'll do really well with it, because they're going to do this. And Cisco, big investor. Symantec, big investor. Google, big investor. Microsoft, big investor. Amazon, big investor. But what we're now seeing too, a lot of the Fortune 500s, yep, they're setting up their own investment shops too. So I think we're going to keep seeing stuff like this. Did you have experience around this, or any surprises here for you, Doug? Anything to add?
Well, I mean, forever and ever, people have said big corporate doesn't innovate because it's very difficult, and I agree with that. I mean, it's very tough when you become a large entity with a large constituency to be innovative, because that's why a lot of those big companies of days gone by stagnated and kind of became these big bloated, giant oil tanker type things that couldn't turn when a storm was coming. So I think what's happening is companies like Google are learning that they don't want to become that big oil tanker, but they are. And they can't not be, because you can't be both big and small at the same time, but that's what they're trying to do. So what they're doing is putting money out there in this innovation sphere and sort of growing new innovations in that small space, and then being able to go out and pluck those things and bring them back on board the big oil tanker. And I like that idea, because I think then you've got, I mean, they're obviously seeking the best of both worlds, which is small, rapid response, flexible, dynamic entities, a startup. But then if they want to, they can bolt that onto their oil tanker and get more speed out of it. So yeah, I'm a fan. I like the idea, because I always got frustrated with the big dogs, and and Cisco is certainly somebody who's turned into a big dog, and I don't want them to stop innovating because they're big. So I think them buying up these small things and putting money out there to let these small things grow is really great. And a lot of times in the past, companies weren't that forward thinking. They were like, well, growing something new is going to be a competitor. But now they're saying, let's grow it and then we'll harvest it before it gets big enough to take us on.
Yep, and that's exactly why we do what we do here. Doug, thanks for stepping in for Paul. It's always great to see you. I'm glad you kept your distance from the microphone, so your health is intact. Hopefully, I will get to see you in person next week when I'm back in the studio, and I can resume my spot as the dumbest person in the room. Until then, everybody, hope you have a great week, and we'll see you soon.